Hi, and thank you for joining us today. This is the start of our webinar series, Journey to the Cloud. And today specifically, we're going to talk through 4 key topics about printing in the cloud. I'm Andrew Parlett, I'm CTO here at Tricerat.
And I'm Nikolai Nikitkin, lead architect here at Tricerat.
So here this fall, we just came back from an event hosted by VMware Explorer,
Yep.
And certainly a wide-ranging set of IT topics, but very much focused on managing cloud and the cloud migration. So we were kind of immersed in it there, in addition to what we do day to day here at Tricerat. But certainly a lot of those cloud topics came up.
Yeah, last year there was a focus on kind of the initial beginnings and research phases it looked like, but now this year it really felt like a lot of vendors, a lot of exhibitors and attendees are really trying to go as full bore as possible to see how they can make these cloud migrations work for them. So.
That's right, and a lot of the VMware messaging was around management layers, especially in a multi-cloud scenario where you don't just have one single platform and application. If you really have that narrowed down view, then usually IT becomes pretty simple, but who's got that? There's always so many different things to manage, and really that works into what we're here to talk about in Tricerat and printing.
Yeah, we've always kind of called ourselves agnostic across the board, and I think this kind of will evolve into a multi-cloud agnostic, if you will, right? As you said, a lot of these companies will have the deployment in AWS, the deployment in Azure over there, maybe some Citrix cloud over here, and all of it needs to work in tandem. And with these management layers and these other various vendors out there, they do a lot of work to make sure that these multi-cloud environments can really flow together. And like you said, with our agnostic approach, print management really comes down to that just as well. And
really, if we just start with what is cloud, because we see so many different environments, and we've called this webinar really the journey to the cloud for that reason, because usually it's stepping stones. Again, it's not where I just have a brand new environment in the cloud. There are different phases from a fully on-prem, perhaps a vision of fully cloud, but usually it's that middle ground, that hybrid approach. But it's also where now I have maybe the best use cases for my different users, but I also have a lot more complexity in the management that I have to apply.
Yeah, and we ran a question at our booth while we were at the expo, which was, where are you in your journey to the cloud? The 3 options we had was on-prem, hybrid, and fully cloud. And what I found very interesting is after that entire day, we had a good number of answers and not a single person checked cloud. I would say majority were still on-prem with some in hybrid, and I think that really shows how complex these migrations can be. And one tiny stumbling block for one tiny workflow somewhere can halt the entire thing. And so this is where a lot of this has to come in with successful management of the environment and integration of everything. Because it's just simple as printing, right? If printing doesn't work in the cloud, you can't really have your users out there.
That's right, yeah. And so really that marketing language, what you see on the stage or what you might read on blogs or different news articles, it might just be everything's in the cloud.
Right.
But the reality of the situation that a lot of admins are facing is what it takes to get my workloads in the cloud, make it make sense, make it be cost effective, and a way that I can manage effective for a good user experience.
Right, and in some business cases, a full cloud deployment just doesn't make sense, right? Cloud means something different to everybody. Cloud can mean a OneDrive, right? Simple as that. But cloud could also mean Azure Active Directory and all kinds of VMs and on AVD or whatever else is going on. So it's all about figuring out those use cases and making sure those workflows are as seamless as they were on-prem. And again, that's just going to take time as folks work through those workflows, find partners to work with to help them out with that. And so I think that's kind of where we're at.
So thinking about printing, actually, our first point tailors perfectly into that, because when we look at printing, we think about maybe like the virtual printer, the queue being enabled in the cloud, but the printer is here with me. Like it's always at least a hybrid, but the print job has to be on-prem. Printing out somewhere else does me no good. So it's the aspect of thinking through the connection. It can't just be everything in the cloud. Ultimately, there has to be a connection to get data from the cloud back down to my on-prem environment where it can print out to a physical piece of paper.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, like you said, it's still a physical printer. So we have that kind of anchor to the physical world, even though we're virtualized in the cloud and whatever else may be. So the data needs to get there securely, in a speedy manner, and it has to get there reliably, right? Because again, with these cloud environments, there's so many moving pieces, so many different providers that it has to go through, so many networks that data has to go through, and we just have to make sure that we pick the correct cloud providers and the correct cloud solutions, specifically for print management, to make sure that data gets through and that physical print job actually comes out.
Right. And so native printing, when I call native printing, maybe like a traditional Windows print share, those type of things, we'll quickly run into problems here where that if that connection isn't reliable like it's expecting on a LAN or USB, obviously here you're printing from applications, desktops, data that are running completely separate from this network. So probably the first thing to really think through is how the environment's architected from a networking standpoint. And there's different ways. If it's completely segmented and separate, we can work with that.
Sure.
You might have IP routing. You might have full network visibility between the two. And a modern print management approach can make sure to adapt to those situations. It might be a reverse proxy. We have a screwdriver's connector that makes it so that I can take a local print server perhaps and make it visible without opening my local firewall, but make it visible to that remote. I think we see quite a few times at least some network visibility, some TCP routing that happens. And in that case, then you've got a lot of flexibility of still having local print servers or direct print to your printers that are running on your LAN.
Yeah, and as I talk to our potential customers and just our existing customers, that's one of my first questions when they're talking about their movement to the cloud is, what does that network connectivity look like? Is it a site-to-site VPN, or is it completely cut off from the world in the sense that it's just over the wide internet and you're kind of relying on security protocols and just a secure connection to make that happen? And like I said, flexibility is the key there. We have both options, right? If you have a site-to-site, great. That's just like a local LAN for us, right, at that point. But if we do need that extra step of connectivity, those cloud connectors are invaluable because a lot of what we've been doing this for quite a while, right? And so we've learned over the years where the data needs to be fast, if that makes sense, right? So if we can get that print job down to that local print server faster over those connectors than we could over regular old TCP/IP, then I mean the benefits of that are I think just the same. The users wouldn't even notice, I think, is the point. They wouldn't even notice that they're working off the cloud. The speeds are just the same as local, or maybe a little bit better depending on the compression and the rest of it. So
exactly. One other variable to consider, which may be obvious, but something to think through here, is where your users are.
Right.
And so if you're trying to connect an office environment, and so I still have network printers and workstations in an office, those print server direct printing certainly makes sense, and still having that network print management. But you could also do client-based printing, where basically any printer that I have connected to my local desktop, laptop, whatever the client is, gets mapped up into that remote session. And this is key, especially for work from home scenarios, mobile use cases where I'm not using network LAN resources. I am actually using kind of a one-off attached to my printer. And so having a modern print management that can do remote printing through clients, but also remote printing through network managed printers, again, and usually it's both. Rarely is it just one or the other.
Yeah, I mean the flexibility of the various use cases has to be thought about, right? Because users never print in one specific way. There's always an application over here that requires this kind of printing. We have a USB printer that must work in this virtual session over here, so like the client printer redirection works there. And I think it's funny that we're talking about redirection again, because again, that's kind of where we come from, and that's what we initially fixed. And now we're back to redirection, but in a slightly new world. And I think that was a pretty cool way to kind of come back around to kind of why we started this in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. And really, we'll be talking throughout this about the virtual driver and the importance of that. And that's really what gives the flexibility over and above just trying to install regular print drivers and hope that it gets across the wire. To be able to have the flexibility of what's installed on that remote desktop, but also how the print jobs are communicated. And I would really take that into our next point, number 2, about data compression for cloud traffic. We've gotten so used to really high bandwidth on LANs. In some scenarios, we're used to high bandwidth even to the internet, but it's never quite the same as local area networking. And when you're talking about full desktops being brought over that WAN connection from the cloud, and then you're adding print traffic to it, thinking through, okay, now in addition to just connecting into the cloud desktop, I'm actually sending print job traffic back through. What are some of the considerations to think about here?
Well, I think the main thing to think about is the cost of data transfer for your cloud provider. Even with our small environment here for our test labs in Azure, it still is a sizable chunk of funds that has to be committed to make sure that that data transfer fee gets paid, right? And so if we can make sure that the data is smaller, it's getting down there faster as well. But the real consideration is, are we sending less data? If the answer is yes, we're saving money. But it's like a double-edged sword. If the file is too small, then when the print job does get to the local environment and to the local print server and to the printer, the quality might suffer, right? So you have to have a print management solution in place that has that capability of kind of making sure the correct compression gets applied based on what the user is trying to print.
One key thing to consider here is print servers.
Right.
A lot of times admins initially hear that and react, oh, get those out of here. I don't want those anymore. And in some scenarios, that's a good way to go, right, is going back to native print driver management, which again, modern print management can do. And there are examples where that's a better way to go.
Yep.
And obviously there's kind of this ideal of not having anything on-prem. But I think it's worth stepping back from that initial reaction and considering some of the advantages that you get. And when you talk about compression, if the print management can control both ends of it. So we have the virtual driver on the cloud desktop, we have the print server locally. That can be optimized in terms of the connection. Get the print traffic encrypted and compressed
right
down to the local network, and then send out where you have full bandwidth and no cost, or at least no
right
additional cost in terms of cloud provider. There are scenarios where if you're properly managing the print server, it really is the optimal way to go.
Yeah. Print server is kind of like the boogeyman of server management, I feel like. And a lot of that comes down to the stability of it, right? Beyond just the compression, the encryption, the stability of the print server is paramount, because no amount of compression or encryption will matter if that print server goes down, right? And I think that's, like you said, like that initial reaction of like, oh, I don't want to manage this. I think it's very valid. You know, just going back on my history, I've had plenty of spooler crashers in my time as an admin. And so if we can make sure that these environments stay up, like for example, through our sub-spool processes, which generate individual processes for each print job to isolate them away from those bad actors, if we can do some of that to prevent some of those crashes, then the compression and the encryption shine even more, right? Because then the entire environment is stable. It's not just getting there fast and we hope it works. It's getting there fast and we're making sure it works.
That's right. It makes a big difference that you don't have to worry about distribution of the driver. It's just one place that you have the driver. You don't have to worry about the old-fashioned Windows print sharing and all of the hassles that come along with that, even some of the vulnerabilities that come with that. Being able to have an agent that manages print server in the way that you were talking about, in a true multi-threaded way and a stable way. And you even see better scalability there because the processing time moves along faster. It keeps the traffic managed. And we've seen environments where even significant numbers of print queues that, you know, back in traditional print server days, you would have never even thought about doing. But here in this model, you can actually do it effectively, and it makes a big difference.
It does. I've talked to plenty of customers over the last couple of years that have been trying to get rid of their print servers or trying to migrate away from them. And what they find is, well, there's enough functionality here, enough centralized management for us to keep them around, but maybe let's look at reducing that number, right? Because we have this stability, this compression, and the rest of the performance behind that print server. I've seen customers cut down from 20 print servers down to 10, right? Because they can load more queues on there because they can trust it more not to just completely crash out in the middle of the production day.
Let's shift from thinking about the on-prem printing and connection from your desktop to what it looks like on the cloud environment. So usually there it's a virtual desktop or some form of it running there in the cloud where you're accessing your Windows applications, your data, everything's coming there remotely. Ultimately though, for an application to do file print and be able to have a print job, you still need a Windows print driver.
Right.
And so again, this is where the traditional way of trying through scripts or GPOs of assigning or even manually embedding drivers into that image, when you have that kind of gold image scenario in a remote desktop environment, to have a virtual driver and a service on top that can install native drivers when necessary, but do it all automatically and dynamically, makes a big difference to the management of that remote desktop.
Exactly. I mean, we're moving to the cloud for the simplicity of it, right? I mean, if we're moving to the cloud, we shouldn't be bringing legacy GPOs and scripts with us, right? We should have a streamlined solution that can handle multiple workloads, multiple use cases, right? So if there is a requirement for that native driver, I've seen plenty of applications that just don't understand virtual drivers. They have to have a specific native driver. That's totally okay, right? We can have a hybrid deployment with some print server environments over here and some direct IP over here, which I would argue that that's one of the most common use cases we have when we talk about the cloud, is because we have to move, as administrators, we have to move all of these applications, sometimes legacy applications, into these cloud workloads. And now we have to understand, like, how are they actually going to print now? Because yes, the environment's changed, but the application still has its old requirements, the same ones that before. So.
It's a great point. And in this kind of modern management scenario, to be able to do both of those things, a virtual driver and a native driver where necessary, and you use the word hybrid, of course, because like we talked about in the beginning, no environment is simple in terms of like one application to one printer to one platform. These are different cloud environments, different hosting, different Windows sessions, different on-prem resources that the users are connecting from. So to be able to adapt, layer on top, and be able to do both as optimally as possible, both from administrator efficiency, but also for that user experience and the optimized performance that they get, being able to log into a remote session that, from an admin, I've boxed this into a very generic situation. But for us to be able to dynamically apply what printers the user gets, the settings for those printers, have everything available correctly for that user in the session, makes a huge difference in terms of their productivity.
It does, and this can lead into our next point, right? If the wrong user has the wrong printer, that could be a security violation, some kind of policy violation, depending on the industry and company that you're managing this for, right? And so when we talk about print solutions, a lot of people tend to forget that, oh right, there's actual data going through these spool files and these various jobs, and some of that data can be very personal and very sensitive. And so we already talked about some of the encryption that we do, right? But when you're looking at these cloud solutions, not just print management, but just in general, you have to take the various compliances into consideration. Does it need to be PCI compliant? Are you passing credit card data through? Is it a healthcare organization? Does it need to be HIPAA compliant or SOC compliant, whatever else? And so I would say that as an administrator, the best solution for me is something I don't have to do a very deep check on. I can make sure that things are per my compliance and move on, or ideally find a solution that doesn't require any of that because it doesn't hold any of the print data.
That's right, and I think this is one of the reasons why in that poll there's still a lot of environments that are holding fast to on-prem. But for those that are looking to migrate or considering that, obviously there's other security concerns outside of printing, but you want to make sure, obviously, that printing works in tandem with your other security considerations. So when you're talking about either VPN or other network securities to secure the desktop, to be able to have print job data either embedded into the virtual channels of that, or if it's out of band with the remote desktop, to do that encryption. And another great reason to look at print servers to make sure that point to point it's encrypted and secure. This is also an area where having agents that get embedded into your existing desktops and kind of that layered in approach. So you manage the agent that runs in the desktop, you manage the agent that's running on-prem and the connectivity in between. You're controlling that, and therefore the print jobs are staying within your bounds, and we're not sending that out to other cloud services. You have control over that. I think an important piece to making sure that there's not something an outlier to your security policies. It all works in tandem.
Yeah. I go back to the word lightweight, right? The more lightweight a solution, with the more functionality has, the greater impact, right? And so if I can avoid having those security considerations because all the data is already mine, right? Like you said, it's all traveling in-house, it's already secured, it's already compliant. I don't have to go through all those extra steps to find a vendor that's compliant with it. I can have a lightweight approach to print management implemented into my cloud or hybrid environment, and I don't have to think about those considerations because I know my environment's secure.
Yeah. Well, Nick, I don't know if you have any other thoughts to wrap up. I know one thing that came to my mind that we didn't really touch on was really just the self-service aspect. And when we talk about the user experience and productivity. That's an important piece because, again, as a user's connecting into a cloud desktop, it might be one day in office, might be from home or on the road. It's great to have the admin interface to be able to adapt to those scenarios, but there's always times where the user might need something that wasn't quite expected, and for them to be able to go in, add it, that's a great piece of modern print management that an admin can deliver to the user without really thinking about like, oh, do I have the right drivers in the right place? It's in the system already. We'll handle that for you.
Exactly. And from a self-service perspective, our customers really appreciate the types of self-service we have. I think the most interesting piece of it is that ability to kind of make sure the correct printers get mapped based on where the user is geographically, maybe by a network segment or a static IP address or something like that. And we can present that self-service in multiple ways, right? And I think one of my favorite ways to do it is through that maps functionality. So as folks travel between different locations and they're not tied to an office anymore, they might be at a touchdown office over here one day, they might be at corporate headquarters the next day. They might not know the layout, they might not know where they're sitting, but they can sure as heck pull up a map and say, oh, there's a printer right there, I can add it right away. So
that's right. Yeah. Great. Anything else come to mind? I think that might cover it all.
Yeah, I think that's a good start to our journey to the cloud conversation here, and I'm just looking forward to more of these as we explore this new frontier, I guess.
Great. Yeah, and I'd like to say thank you again for joining us. You know, in terms of where to go from here, hopefully this information was useful to really just start thinking about some of these other scenarios. Maybe you have a cloud environment and you're struggling with this type of management. Maybe you're just thinking about the pieces that need to go into place to get there. We talk to people all the time, IT admins. Nick, I know you spend a lot of your day doing this, just kind of one-on-one consultations, because even though a lot of our environments have similarities, there's no two environments that are the same. So to really understand what your requirements are, what you're looking to do, and then we can talk about how the solution would work there. You know, one of the things about, I know for screwdrivers is the broadness of the ways it can adapt. So what are the pieces that actually go in place and are relevant for you? So we like to have those conversations, certainly through our website, tricerat.com. You can get in touch with us that way. Yep. We are looking to do some more sessions here in this Journey into the Cloud webinar series. So if you'd like input on where this goes, and we'll certainly be publishing out new dates and new topics that we talk about in the different aspects here. And we're also looking to do a live Q&A session coming up. So again, if maybe you're not quite ready to do a one-on-one session, if you want to join into that when those come around, that's a good way to kind of ask a little more specific of a question, but to see how it might apply into your environment.
Yeah, exactly. And again, thank you for this webinar. I think this is a great start to a very good conversation for not just us as a software developer, but also just as a solutions provider for our customers, right? We have to understand what the cloud means, and they have to understand what the cloud means for them. And I think this is just a good start to that. So, yeah.
All right. Well, thank you again. And Nick, thanks for joining us today.
Of course, anytime. Thank you.